And I remember one time, Lilu told me during one of these lunches, he said, "Yeah, you should look at and maybe you should buy Amore Pacific." Okay. And I said, Amore what? He said, Amore Pacific. Okay. He said, it's a Korean company. Okay. And I said, okay. And, I went back and I looked at this and everything's in Korean. Excuse my French. Everything's in Korean. Okay. And I figure out it's a cosmetics company. And then I also figure out that there's some of their products you can actually find in Southern California. But I could never really figure the business out. Okay. And I really couldn't really get my arms around it in terms of like what was the secret sauce here or whatever. So I eventually just, left it alone. And that went up like something like 80x after he told me that. Okay. I just watched it like go crazy. Okay. And they had this product which, this extract from snails, which women would apply on their faces, and it would make them younger, make them look younger. The wrinkles kind of go away or whatever. And what Amore Pacific had been able to do, what they had been able to convince Chinese women that, and I think now Korea is very well known for being kind of the state of the art for Asian women's skin products and so on. And they had a massive tailwind from Chinese women clamoring for their products, and they've done really well. And so I said, well, such is life. And then, after I think a year or something, he tells me, you should buy Mautai. Okay. And I said, Lilu, and I used some colorful language with him. I said, you give me these names. Then I go and I can't figure out head or tail. So I'm not going to do it that way. Please spend the next 20 minutes explaining Mautai to me. He said, why didn't you ask me that for Amore Pacific? I would have done that for you. I said, okay, we're gradually learning. So then he proceeds to explain Mautai to me. And Mautai is now the most valued liquor company in the world. It's the most valuable company. So it basically just has one product, but it's more valuable than any of the other global liquor players.
And it was depressed at the time, right? Because there was a corruption scandal and people could no longer give Mautai as a gift.
Yeah, it's very heavily consumed by government officials who are being wined and dined by people in the private sector and all that. And of course, the Mautai is flowing freely. And then it became that if you were out at lunch and you were a government official and there was Mautai on the table, you wouldn't be seen after that. You pretty much would suddenly disappear off the face of the earth, never to be heard from again. And so there, when they were cracking down, it became synonymous because the government's perspective was nothing good is happening if there's Mautai on the table. One bottle, I don't know what the prices are now, but when I held the stock, it was over $1,000, $1,200 for a bottle, and it might be a lot higher by now. And this time I was actually able to understand the business. They actually had English financials, and it was pretty straightforward to figure out, and made the investment. And like everything else in my life, I sold too soon. And but anyway, those lunches were really good, and Lilu and I became great friends. And actually, there's one business that we actually then collaborated on, which was Micron, and so that actually went from me to him. The other ones were coming from him to me, and so we had a good interaction and exchange on that, and then he took a position, and I think he'll hold that for a while.
And what to go back to that original question, what do you think Charlie saw in him? Because I remember Charlie once saying, I can't remember whether it was to you or Guy Spear, that it was lucky Lilu was a force for good because he's so unbelievably talented that if he wanted to rule the world, he could be. And if I remember rightly, I've met Lilu a few times, but I've never been able to interview him on the record, only kind of privately on background. When I was studying him, I think he was the first person at Columbia University to get a triple major, which he got while sleeping in a in an apartment in the living room that he shared with about 8 people. And this wasn't even in his first language. I mean, he had just come from Tiananmen Square.
It's not actually a triple major. It's 3 degrees. It's a MBA, it's a law degree, and it's an undergraduate degree, all at the same time. I mean, these are the complete. It's not like a bachelor's degree with 3 majors. This is well beyond that. In a language that's a foreign language to him, right? And he did really well in all of them. But when I asked Charlie the question, he said, well, it was a complete no-brainer. And he said, I just had to look at the track record. So he said, here was a guy who was on student loans. He had no money. And on the float of the student loans, which is, he would get the money in, January, maybe he has to pay it in April or something. He said he would invest the float of the student loans. And when he graduated, he had $1 million. Okay. So when Lilu finished at Columbia with Columbia's loan money, with the stuff he was doing, and then after that, he went into venture capital, and he had an incredible record. One of his early investments is a company now that we know as Capital IQ. And actually, a lot of what is Capital IQ, a lot of influence from Lilu. And Capital IQ basically is the closest thing you can get to Bloomberg. It's a really incredible product. I mean, like, we have a subscription, we pay them an arm and a leg, and we can't get around it. So he's been an incredible investor, and I think what Charlie said was, it was one of the easiest decisions to figure out that Lilu was amazing. He said that his track record was incredible.